Have you ever wondered what would happen if the person you've been tormenting turns out to be your unexpected savior? What if the quiet kid you've been pushing around holds the key to your survival? What if your greatest enemy becomes your most important teacher in the most unimaginable way? Marcus Thompson ruled Lincoln High like a tyrant king. At 17, he stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and a sneer that could silence an entire hallway. His designer clothes, expensive sneakers, and the latest iPhone weren't just possessions. They were weapons of intimidation. Every morning, students would scatter like leaves when they saw him coming, their eyes fixed on the floor, hoping to avoid his attention. But there was one student who couldn't escape Marcus's cruel gaze, Daniel Chen, a 15-year-old sophomore with thick glasses, second-hand clothes, and a backpack held together with duct tape. Daniel was everything Marcus despised, quiet, studious, and worst of all, seemingly defenseless. While other students at least tried to blend in, Daniel's very existence seemed to provoke Marcus's worst instincts. The harassment began on Daniel's first day at Lincoln High. Marcus had spotted him in the cafeteria, sitting alone with a homemade sandwich while reading a worn paperback novel. Something about Daniel's peaceful concentration irritated Marcus beyond reason. Maybe it was the way Daniel seemed content with so little, or perhaps it was how he didn't seem to care about the social hierarchy that Marcus had worked so hard to dominate. "Hey, bookworm," Marcus had called out that first day, grabbing Daniel's sandwich and taking a massive bite before dropping it on the floor. "Welcome to my school." The cafeteria had fallen silent, waiting to see how the new kid would respond. Daniel had simply picked up his sandwich, thrown it away, and walked out without a word. That quiet dignity had enraged Marcus more than any comeback could have. From that day forward, Daniel became Marcus's favorite target. Every morning brought new humiliations, books knocked from Daniel's hands, his locker vandalized with cruel messages, his lunch money taken as payment for protection. The worst part wasn't the physical harassment, though that was painful enough. It was the way other students watched with mixture of pity and relief, grateful it wasn't happening to them. Daniel never fought back, never complained to teachers, never even raised his voice. He would simply clean up whatever mess Marcus had made, replace whatever had been broken, and continue with his day as if nothing had happened. This response only seemed to fuel Marcus's cruelty, as if Daniel's refusal to break was a personal challenge that needed to be conquered. The other students whispered about Daniel's home life. Some said his mother worked 3 jobs to support them after his father left. Others claimed his family had immigrated from China with nothing but hope and determination. What everyone knew for certain was that Daniel walked 2 miles to school every morning because his mother couldn't afford a car, and he spent his afternoons at the public library because their apartment was too small and noisy for studying. Marcus's crew, Jake, Trevor, and Austin, were always ready to join in the harassment. They competed to see who could come up with the most creative ways to humiliate Daniel. Jake would accidentally spill his drink on Daniel's homework. Trevor would spread rumors about Daniel's family being weird or different. Austin would imitate Daniel's quiet voice and careful way of speaking, exaggerating his slight accent until the mockery became cruel parody. Mrs. Rodriguez, Daniel's English teacher, noticed the harassment but felt powerless to stop it. The bullying was subtle enough to avoid serious consequences. A shoulder bump here, a whispered insult there, the kind of psychological warfare that left no visible marks. When she tried to intervene, Marcus would flash his charming smile and claim it was all just friendly joking around. His father was on the school board after all, and Marcus knew exactly how much he could get away with. The breaking point came on a cold February morning during what should have been an ordinary day. Marcus had been having problems at home. His parents were fighting constantly about money, despite their outward appearance of success, and his girlfriend had broken up with him the night before. He was looking for someone to take out his frustration on, and Daniel was the perfect target. Daniel was in the library before school, as usual, working on a science project about renewable energy. His materials were spread across a table, carefully drawn diagrams, typed research notes, and a small working model of a solar panel he'd built from salvaged parts. It represented weeks of work and genuine passion for the subject. Marcus walked in with his crew, ostensibly looking for a place to skip first period. When he saw Daniel's project, something twisted in his chest. Here was this poor kid, this nobody, creating something genuinely impressive while Marcus struggled to maintain his grades despite expensive tutors and his parents' constant pressure. The unfairness of it all made Marcus's anger boil over. "What's this, Danny boy?" Marcus asked, using the nickname he knew Daniel hated. He picked up the solar panel model, examining it with mock interest. "Playing with toys instead of studying like a real student?" Daniel looked up from his work, his dark eyes calm but cautious. "It's a renewable energy project for Mr. Patterson's class. Please be careful with it." His voice was steady, polite, but there was something different in his tone, a quiet firmness that hadn't been there before. "Please be careful," Marcus mimicked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What are you gonna do if I'm not careful, huh?" He held the model higher, dangling it carelessly above the hard floor. The threat was clear, and several other students in the library turned to watch, sensing that something significant was about to happen. For the first time in 2 years of harassment, Daniel stood up. He wasn't tall or intimidating, but there was something in his posture that made Marcus pause. "That project represents 40 hours of work," Daniel said quietly. "It's for the state science fair. If you break it, you're not just hurting me, you're taking away something that could help my family." Marcus felt a flicker of uncertainty, but his reputation was on the line now. Too many people were watching. "Oh, I'm so scared," he sneered, and deliberately let the model slip from his fingers. The solar panel crashed to the floor, its carefully assembled components scattering across the library carpet. Weeks of work destroyed in seconds. The watching students gasped, and Mrs. Henderson, the librarian, started to rush over. But Daniel's reaction stopped everyone in their tracks. Instead of anger or tears, Daniel's face showed something much more powerful: disappointment. Not in the broken project, but in Marcus himself. He knelt down and began carefully collecting the pieces, his movements deliberate and dignified. When he looked up at Marcus, his expression was almost pitying. "I'm sorry for you," Daniel said softly, but his voice carried clearly through the silent library. "I can build another project, but you'll still be the kind of person who destroys things just because you can." Those words hit Marcus harder than any punch could have. For a moment, he saw himself through Daniel's eyes, not as a powerful leader, but as a petty destroyer of other people's dreams. The shame was overwhelming, but instead of acknowledging it, Marcus lashed out even harder. "You think you're better than me?" Marcus snarled, stepping closer to Daniel. "You think your little science project makes you special? You're nothing, Danny. You'll always be nothing." But as Marcus raised his voice, as his crew snickered and other students watched with horrified fascination, none of them noticed the smoke beginning to curl from the chemistry lab across the hall. Mr. Patterson had been preparing an experiment for first period, and a Bunsen burner left unattended had ignited some papers on a nearby desk. The fire spread quickly in the old building. By the time the smoke alarm started shrieking, flames were already licking at the lab door. Students began screaming and running toward the exits, their morning routines forgotten in the face of real danger. In the chaos, Marcus found himself trapped. The main library exit was blocked by panicking students, and the emergency exit was on the other side of the room, past the chemistry lab where the fire was growing rapidly. Smoke was filling the hallway, making it hard to see and breathe. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt genuinely afraid. As students pushed past him towards safety, Marcus looked around desperately for another way out. The smoke was getting thicker, and he could hear the crackle of flames getting closer. His crew had already fled, leaving him behind without a second thought. The irony wasn't lost on him. All his power, all his intimidation, meant nothing when real danger struck. That's when he felt a hand on his arm. Through the smoke and confusion, Daniel appeared beside him, still clutching the broken pieces of his science project. While everyone else was running away from the danger, Daniel had stayed behind. "This way," Daniel said simply, tugging Marcus toward the back corner of the library. "There's a service exit behind the reference section. I noticed it when I was researching fire safety codes for my project." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "Why are you helping me after what I just did?" Daniel didn't pause in leading them towards safety. "Because that's what decent people do," he said matter-of-factly. "They help each other, even when the other person doesn't deserve it." The service exit was indeed there, hidden behind tall bookshelves that most students never noticed. Daniel pushed it open, revealing a narrow hallway that led directly outside. As they emerged into the cold morning air, both boys gasping and coughing, Marcus realized that Daniel had quite literally saved his life. The fire department arrived within minutes, quickly containing the blaze to just the chemistry lab and part of the adjoining hallway. No one was seriously hurt, thanks largely to the quick evacuation and the fact that someone had called 911 immediately when the smoke was first spotted. As students gathered on the school lawn, watching firefighters battle the remaining flames, word spread quickly about what had happened. Someone had seen Daniel leading Marcus to safety through the service exit. Others had witnessed Marcus breaking Daniel's project just minutes before the fire started. The contrast was stark and impossible to ignore. "Did you hear? The quiet Asian kid saved Marcus Thompson's life. After Marcus destroyed his science project, Danny still went back for him. I can't believe it. Marcus was being his usual jerk self, and then Danny literally saved him from the fire." Marcus stood apart from his usual group, still shaken by how close he'd come to serious injury or worse. His crew was already spinning stories about their own heroic escapes. But Marcus couldn't focus on anything except Daniel's calm words. Because that's what decent people do. When the fire chief interviewed students about the evacuation, Daniel's actions were officially recognized. He had not only saved Marcus, but had also alerted Mrs. Henderson about 2 younger students who were hiding in the bathroom, too scared to come out. While others had panicked, Daniel had remained calm and helpful, making sure everyone got to safety. The local news picked up the story. "Student hero saves bully who had just destroyed his science project," ran as the headline in the evening paper. Daniel's photo appeared next to a description of his quick thinking and selfless actions during the fire. The article mentioned the destroyed project, Marcus's history of harassment, and Daniel's decision to help anyway. Marcus's parents were mortified when they read the story. Not because their son had been in danger, but because the entire community now knew that Marcus was the kind of person who bullied someone and then had to be saved by his victim. The shame was overwhelming, and for the first time in Marcus's life, his parents held him truly accountable for his actions. At school the next day, everything was different. Students who had previously ignored Daniel now nodded respectfully as he passed. Teachers who had been aware of the bullying but hadn't intervened directly now made sure to acknowledge Daniel's courage. The principal called Daniel to her office, not to discipline him, but to officially commend his bravery and leadership during the emergency. Marcus, meanwhile, found himself isolated. His crew still hung around him, but the dynamic had shifted. Everyone knew that when real danger struck, Marcus had needed to be rescued by the person he'd been tormenting. His reputation as someone to be feared had been replaced by a much more complex reality. He was revealed as someone who was ultimately dependent on the kindness of those he'd considered beneath him. The science fair was postponed for 2 weeks due to the fire damage, giving Daniel time to rebuild his project. Word of his story had spread beyond the school, and local engineers and scientists began reaching out to offer help and materials. What had been a solo project built from salvaged parts became a community effort supported by professionals who admired Daniel's resilience and character. Marcus watched from afar as Daniel worked on his new project, this time with help from actual solar energy experts who had heard his story. The irony was painful. By destroying Daniel's original work, Marcus had inadvertently connected Daniel with resources and support that made his new project 10 times better than the original would have been. The day of the rescheduled science fair, Daniel's renewable energy project won first place at the regional level and qualified for the state competition. As he stood on the stage accepting his award, Daniel spotted Marcus in the audience. Instead of gloating or ignoring him, Daniel gave a small nod of acknowledgement, not friendship, but recognition of their shared humanity. Marcus realized in that moment that he had learned the hardest lesson of his life. True strength wasn't about intimidating others or showing off wealth and power. It was about having the character to do the right thing, even when no one would blame you for walking away. Daniel had demonstrated more real power in that one act of saving Marcus than Marcus had ever wielded through years of bullying. The weeks that followed were a period of difficult self-reflection for Marcus. He couldn't go back to his old ways of treating people, not after seeing what real character looked like. His crew gradually drifted away as Marcus stopped leading their harassment campaigns. Some students remained wary of him, unsure if his change was genuine or temporary. Marcus never became friends with Daniel. The damage of 2 years of harassment couldn't be undone so easily. But he did something perhaps more meaningful. He left Daniel alone and began actively discouraging other students from picking on anyone. When he saw freshmen being hassled by upperclassmen, he would step in with a simple, "Leave them alone." His reputation meant that most students listened. Daniel went on to win the state science fair and earned a full scholarship to study renewable energy engineering at MIT. His story became an inspiration to other students who felt powerless in the face of bullying. He never spoke publicly about forgiving Marcus, but his actions had demonstrated something more powerful than forgiveness. They had shown that true strength lies in choosing kindness, even when kindness hasn't been shown to you. Years later, when Marcus was struggling in community college and working part-time jobs to pay his way, he would think back to that day in the library. He had learned that destroying someone else's dreams doesn't make you powerful. It makes you small. And sometimes, the person you're trying to tear down is the very person who will reach out to save you when you're falling. The lesson Daniel taught Marcus that day wasn't delivered through words or confrontation. It was taught through action, through the quiet dignity of doing what's right even when you've been wronged. It was a lesson about the difference between having power over people and having the power to lift people up, even those who don't deserve it. Marcus never became the person Daniel was. Few people have that kind of innate goodness and strength, but he did become someone better than who he had been. Someone who understood that true character is revealed not in how you treat those who can help you, but in how you treat those who seemingly can't. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won through fighting back, but through rising above. Sometimes the most powerful lesson you can teach someone isn't through punishment, but through grace. And sometimes the person who seems weakest turns out to be the strongest person in the room. Daniel Chen saved more than Marcus Thompson's life that day. He saved Marcus's soul, showing him a different way to be in the world. The quiet kid with the second-hand clothes and the duct-tape backpack became the teacher Marcus never knew he needed, delivering a lesson in humanity that no classroom could have provided. The story of Daniel and Marcus reminds us that we never know when we might be the person who needs saving, or when we might be called to be someone else's savior. In our darkest moments, Help might come from the most unexpected source, perhaps even from someone we've wronged. Strength isn't about who can knock others down. True strength is about who chooses to lift others up, even when they've been knocked down themselves. The bully learned that day that power without compassion is just cruelty, and cruelty ultimately leaves you alone when you need help the most. Daniel's quiet courage changed not just Marcus, but everyone who witnessed it. His example rippled through the school, inspiring other students to stand up for each other and showing everyone that heroism doesn't require a cape or superpowers. Sometimes it just requires the decision to do what's right, even when it's hard. The greatest teachers in our lives often come disguised as ordinary people, doing extraordinary things in ordinary moments. Daniel Chen was just a quiet sophomore with a homemade lunch and a second-hand backpack, but he taught an entire school the difference between being feared and being respected, between having power and using power wisely. If this story moved you and reminded you that real strength comes from character, not from tearing others down, make sure to subscribe to Top Life Stories for more inspiring tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because you never know when you might need to remember that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most unexpected teachers.